Over 75% of you are over 25 years old that watch my channel. And so we're going to be talking about learning to code as an adult with additional responsibilities. All right. So I'm not talking about 18 being an adult. I'm talking about like a real adult, married, children, heavy responsibilities, another job. I'm talking about the grueling nature sometimes of being an adult with responsibilities we can't escape from. So I want to give you some advice on how to learn to code, to grow as a developer. And ultimately, it comes down to being really efficient with your time. So we have to have a real conversation for a second. So I'm going to address a portion of you that want to give me some bullshit about how you have no time to learn to code. That is less than 0.1% of you. That is an extreme minority. You know it. If you dig in and be really critical whenever you tell people, I just don't have enough time to learn this, you know you're full of shit. Stop being full of shit. The reality is you don't want it enough to make time for it. Stop fooling yourself. Stop fooling everyone else. Stop making excuses. You have to make time for this. You have to. If you want to choose not to, then I would just click out of this video right now because you're not going to hear a thing that I'm saying. So I just want to address people that are full of shit. You have to make time for this. Now, for people that understand this, that are realistic with themselves, let's go ahead and help you out. So we'll kind of address people that have a full-time job right now. So let's say you work 40 hours a week, maybe up to 50. There are going to be different opportunities, different schedules where you will have blocks of time that's available to you. So I don't think giving you like a do this schedule is going to work for anyone, right? Because I don't know your schedule. But what I can tell you is how learning happens, how growth happens as a software engineer. It does not happen from you pulling out a mobile device while you're at work and studying syntax by trying to remember it. That's not how you learn to code. And a lot of people do this. And I, even in my own cohort, I hosted an experimental cohort a while back. Even in my own cohort, I had a couple people doing this because they worked so much. And I had to tell them to stop over and over and over. And they thought they were being productive. The problem with that is when you were at work, you don't want to split your focus doing something else. Like if you are someone where you have like a hour or even a full half an hour to bring out a laptop and do a little work, that can be doable. Now, you know, I'm not saying this is an ethical thing to do because I don't know how well you're performing at your job, but there are some jobs where you have lulls and downtime. And even I've heard plenty of stories at mills where I grew up where you would work for like 2 hours straight and then you'd have like 45 minutes off and you could do whatever you wanted with that time. I'm talking to people like you that have that block of time allotted to them. If you really have a short duration where you can only look at your phone and you're just trying to study little by little, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, give your mind a rest. You are doing a full-time job and you're expecting to retain this and constantly keep your mind active, never giving your mind a rest between your full-time work and then going back to coding and constantly context switching, which can really have an emotional toll on you. And you need to have periods throughout the day where you can shut your brain off. Like during lunch, don't study during lunch. Take time off to decompress with your day so your current job doesn't burn you out as much and you could put more focus and more energy and more attention when you do finally get to code. Stop trying to cram it all in, most of the time, this will not work. If you are rare, if you are an exceptional person that can make this work and you never get burned out and your mind is just constantly wired and constantly going and you're able to provide that attention, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the average person who, like me, cannot keep my mind going 24/7 and retain things. And that's the little devious trick that people do on themselves when they're really busy. They have a lot of work, a lot of responsibilities. They fool themselves into thinking that they're going to retain what they're learning, and that just putting in 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here with their mobile phone, doing flashcard stuff, they're going to learn to code. That's not going to happen. And it's devious because you are just sapping your energy. People only have so much energy, mental energy throughout the day. Man, and you're going to burn out before you even start. You're not going to last. The key is to dedicate blocks of your time, preferably 2 hours, up to 2 hours, where you can learn to code a little bit, especially in the beginning, where you can maybe go through up to 30 minutes of course material, an hour and a half of practice of coding, of doing coding challenges that reinforce that fundamental concept that you are learning, right? Of building. The ratio of learning to building needs to be similar to that, where it's a little bit of learning. Expect that you're not going to retain much past 20, 30 minutes. And maybe you build up a habit of attention where you can do that. But really, it's an attention problem. And a lot of people have trouble focusing, and they can read it. They can go through the material. They could do the challenges. Then they forget. They wonder why. It's because you haven't built up a really good habit of pure attention and focus and getting into that zone of where you are just synced into what you're learning. You are understanding everything. Everything is clicking because you are in the zone of what you are doing. A lot of developers can't even keep up the zone in their professional positions, right? It's a very hard, I'm lacking the term for it. Let me know in the comments what that term is. It's flow. It's a state of flow. And you want to get into that state of flow, but you're not going to stay in it with learning. People don't. That's why even with coding boot camps where everything's incredibly intense, like full-time coding boot camp problems, you're not spending 3-4 hours learning. And coding boot camps that are doing that, that's probably why they're fucking up. You're spending a short duration learning, a ton of time practicing, right? So 2-hour durations is great. So if you can do that on a Saturday, if you can do that on a Sunday, if you could do that, maybe Tuesday is your down day. Maybe Friday you get off a little bit early and you got to sacrifice your Friday because that's when you have more time. That's where you have more energy. You got to make that sacrifice. And that's another theme. When you have other responsibilities, you are going to be making sacrifices to make this happen. You are not going to escape that. Most successful people that have become developers with children, with jobs, families, other responsibilities, I don't think you realize the number of sacrifices they had to make. You truly do not some of you truly do not understand how much more you need to sacrifice to make this happen. To be able to give yourself these longer durations, this time to being able to study, to learning to code. Now, this can be trickier with kids. And I understand that, especially newborns. And I flat out told someone, she's been in my community for a little bit and she wanted to participate in the front end cohort and she was having a new kid and I could have helped her as much as possible, but I flat out told her it's probably a bad idea to join at this point. You just had a newborn. Give yourself time, give yourself a year to get through this newborn stage before you really go full force with the coding and learning to code, because there are probably going to be large chunks of time where you are going to, maybe you might have like a full week. Like the kid's just not keeping you up at night. They're not crying. They're letting you sleep. They're not being fussy. And then another week that isn't the case, right? Or life events come up. But when you go longer durations of not doing something because life stirs up, because your kid has a toothache and you finally figured it out at the end of the week what the problem was, why your kid just kept crying over and over and over. And then that entire week until you figure it out, that entire 2 weeks until you figure it out, you didn't code, you didn't get sleep, you're losing so much. You need a little bit of a steadier schedule to consistently, week after week, reinforce these concepts, because it is a use it or lose it situation. Now, I'm not saying you need to be going full force every single week, but you need to be consistent week after week, learning to code, progressing just a little bit more, learning a little bit, building a lot to reinforce what you learned. You need to do that consistently, week after week, after month, after year, after year. It's really hard to do that with a newborn. So I'm giving you a fair warning. It's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to forget most of what you're doing. Give yourself time to get through that situation. But for most of you, it's communication with your partner. For most of you, if you're still living at home, it's communication with your parents. This is what I'm doing. This is, if you're 25 with your parents, listen, I was 27, 28 living with my mom when I quit a while back. I think when I was going through a coding boot camp, I actually had moved in with my mom. And it's an ego check, especially for men, but you got to do what you got to do. And if it's your parents, you got to communicate with and say, like, listen, I'm going to be doing a part-time job. I'm going to be paying my bills, but I really need a little bit of help while I dedicate these 3 days to like really spending a lot of time building and learning to code, right? It's communicating with whoever you live with, who is going to affect your schedule, who is also going to potentially be able to support you, to help you out, to take the kids and away from you so you can have a little focus and you can concentrate, because that focus and that concentration is incredibly important with learning. It is underestimated how important that is. And when you have a noisy environment, again, noise canceling headphones are really good for this. If you have a small home, but the wife or husband is watching the kids while you code, noise canceling headphones are amazing at this. And I recommend the Bossy headphones. Now, the earmuffs only last about a year, where I usually have to replace them. So they're like $250, really expensive, but they are by far the best investment I ever made. But one thing I got to tell you with these headphones, because I'm almost certain I've worn these way too much where they might have given me tinnitus. That's a whole other thing. Give your head a rest. Don't use these headphones that often, but when you want to concentrate, when you have noise around you, they're really, really good. So it's really about communicating with people around you so that they can make sacrifices while you also try to make sacrifices to get these blocks of coding in. And again, you can't just learn a little bit and not apply it and expect it to retain it. I keep talking about this because so many of you, I know so many of you, when I talk to you and I go through mentorship sessions, so many of you think that you can, and then you forget, and then you get frustrated, then you get burned out because you're not seeing your growth because you keep forgetting stuff and you have these long lulls in coding. You have to be consistent about it, and you have to make it so that your life allows for that consistency. It'll be flexible. You might code on Tuesday instead of Monday. Might then have to pile everything during the week and then code on Saturday because this week, your water heater broke down or your electricity ran out, right? This is part of life. But consistently, week after week, you need to find a way to make it happen. And the truth is, if you can't find that consistency, you're probably not going to become a developer. If you can't make sacrifices to give yourself blocks of time to learn to code, you're probably not going to be able to retain enough to actually grow as a developer. I'm not here to tell you that, yes, no matter what your situation is, you can make it work. If you can only dedicate 30 minutes per week, or you can only dedicate 5 15-minute sessions throughout the week, you can do this. You can make this work. No, a lot of you won't. And a lot of you are going to fail doing that. And maybe you need to spend a couple years getting a different job. Maybe you need to spend a couple of years breaking up with your fiance or your girlfriend or boyfriend because they're not supporting you in your goals, because they want something that you can't give and that don't align with your trajectory in life. These are hard decisions that some of you might have to make to actually become a developer, right? Now, I'm not saying you should jump to these extreme examples, but like, you're going to have to make sacrifices, and you're going to have to figure out what sacrifices you can make. And a lot of times I'm telling you, one big sacrifice I had to make was I had to completely toss a lot of really unsupportive friendships, unsupportive family relationships, where sometimes you get family that try to influence you in a certain direction, and you just have to tell them to shut up. I don't want to hear it. And you can use kinder words, but shut the fuck up. Like, I don't want to become a doctor. I don't want to become a dentist. I don't want to get into business. Shut the fuck up. And your friends that want you to continue going out on the weekends and drinking with them. I'm not going, and you will lose those friends eventually. There are a lot of people, when you start changing your life for the better and you start changing who you are, where they are no longer comfortable with who you are because you are a different person, and people like comfortability and they like keeping in relationships and friendships with people that they know. And when they don't know you anymore because you are drastically changing your schedule, yourself, your habits, which is also another thing you should be working on. We'll talk about that in a second. But when you are drastically changing yourself, which is needed to become a software engineer, especially in this market, you're going to find that not everyone in your life agrees with that. And sometimes you got to toss them out of your life. That was a big thing I had to do. But I would say the last thing that I think is going to be helpful for a lot of people with a lot of responsibilities, a lot of stress, a lot of burnout. Burnout is a really tricky thing. It's really hard to identify what's burning you out, but it's easy to identify common things that will help alleviate that burnout and get you grounded again. That is high intensity cardio. High intensity cardio is amazing for stress. That is lifting. It's getting your heart rate up. That is participating in hobbies. That is meditation. That is grounding yourself. A lot of people don't like to meditate. I have trouble finding patience for meditation. This is something that I truly struggle with, but I have found my grounding in other areas. But mindfulness meditation, literally just taking 5 minutes out of your day to cut out the noise and literally just focus on your breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. Doing that 5 minutes a day gets you to stop focusing on all of this external noise. Gets you to stop focusing on your asshole of a boss, on your unhelpful spouse, on your children that won't stop getting you sick, bringing diseases home from schools. That grounding that mindfulness meditation gives people, it's truly magical. And if all you have is 5 minutes out of the day to de-stress, I highly recommend mindfulness meditation. It is huge. It can work miracles for stress. Now, it'd be helpful, and you want to be consistent with that. You start seeing compounding effects when you do it daily and up into maybe 10 minutes, right? But you can find your grounding. There are different, and sometimes it's just changing your diet, eating healthier foods, not eating bad carbs that clog your mind, right? I find that my mind is really clear when I do intermittent fasting, and I eat very clean carbs and very few carbs, right? I'm a big meat person. I will never get along with living with a vegetarian, ever. I love meat. And I find that the inflammation in my body, just from changing my diet to focus more on eating meat. I do meat and vegetables, a lot of meat and vegetables. It clears my mind. I don't have this foggy brain. These are things that you could focus on that will help ground you as a person, will help bring mental clarity, which then helps with your focus with learning to code, which then helps you properly assess your really stressful living situation, and it helps give you a different perspective on it so the stress isn't as high. You bring that stress down. You ground yourself so that the time you have with coding counts. It matters. You can focus on it. You can remember it. You can care about it. You can start to like it. You can start to love it, which will then pull you. Instead of relying on that motivation, forcing yourself to code every day, it can start pulling you towards becoming a developer because, when you get into a really big fitness routine, you don't want to stop because you feel so good doing it. You can create that habit to overcome a lack of motivation, to pull you towards what you truly want to become. And that's a professional software engineer. That's a professional developer. That's building really cool things. That's what you strive for. But it's going to take sacrifice.